Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the All-Ireland Food Integrity Initiative. My name is Professor Fiona Doohan, and I'm a Professor of Plant Health here in UCD, and I'm the co-chair of this initiative. Over the last few years, we have had discussions and collaborative interactions north and south towards developing this initiative, with the idea that we want to contribute to the sustainable development of the food systems on this island and to act as an exemplar for international communities to show what can be done in terms of increasing the sustainability of our food systems. I should start off by defining what do we mean by food integrity, and we mean food that we produce food that is safe, that is authentic, nutritious, the systems that we use to produce the food, that they are sustainable, that we produce food to the highest ethical standards, and that we respect the environment and those who work at all elements and at all levels within our food industry. So that's just to define what we mean by food integrity. Just to go through the programme, we're going to have an opening address by the Minister for Agriculture in the Republic of Ireland. Then Tom Arnold will give the keynote speech. Professor Chris Elliott from Queen's will overview the global challenges. We'll have an introduction to the All-Ireland Food Integrity by myself. Then we will have an introduction to a project that has emerged out of cross-border collaboration and an exemplar of what can be done when we work together collectively on the island. We'll follow that with a question and answer session, so if you have any questions, please post them. Then we'll have the closing address by Minister Poots from Northern Ireland, and Professor Aidan Cassidy, the co-chair of Food-I, will close the launch event. So without further ado, we'll kick off. I'd like to introduce the Minister who's going to launch the event. Just to say that Minister McConalogue is from the very nice county of Donegal, no bias intended. He was born in Glenealy in County Donegal and from a farming background. He's worked in Fianna Fáil headquarters for a number of years, and he was returned home to work on the family farm in Donegal in 2009. And in 2011, Charlie was elected as a TD for Donegal North East. He was previously appointed as Minister for State for the Department of Justice and Equality with responsibility for law reform. And prior to that, he held the position of Fianna Fáil spokesperson for children, education and skills, and agriculture, food and the marine. So we're very grateful to Minister McConalogue for officially launching the event today.
Integrity Initiative. I'm especially pleased to be speaking alongside my good friend, Minister Edwin Poots. I welcome the Food-I initiative, which provides a unique opportunity to bring stakeholders from all over the island of Ireland together to support innovation and research capability and capacity in order to implement change in the sustainability, security and integrity of our food systems. Food Vision 2030 is the new stakeholder-led strategy for our agri-food sector. Its ambition is for Ireland to be a world leader in sustainable food systems. The sector, including farmers, finishers, foresters, food and drink processors and manufacturers, state agencies and other stakeholders, came together to plan for the sector's continued development. This multi-stakeholder approach to policy formulation, successfully led by your keynote speaker, Tom Arnold, has produced a strategy that is a landmark for the Irish agri-food sector and has the potential to transform the agriculture, food, forestry and marine sectors in the period of 2030, with sustainability at its core. Both Food-I and Food Vision recognise the global challenge in food production systems. One of the standout aspects of Food Vision is its adoption of a food systems approach. A food systems approach involves considering the interconnectivity of the food system, especially with the environment and with nutrition and health. A sustainable food system is one that delivers food security and nutrition for everyone in such a way that the economic, environmental and social basis to generate food and nutrition for future generations are not compromised. The Food Vision 2030 strategy was developed with this context in mind, and it aims to balance the three pillars of sustainability under a holistic food systems approach. The strategy consists of 22 goals, which are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. The goals are grouped into 4 high-level missions for the sector to work towards. Mission 1 is about outlines a climate-smart, environmentally sustainable agri-food sector. Mission 2 relates to viable and resilient primary producers with enhanced well-being. Mission 3 then relates to food that is safe, nutritious and appealing, trusted and valued at home and abroad. And Mission 4 details an innovative, competitive and resilient agri-food sector which is driven by technology and talent. We're all watching, unfortunately, the events in Ukraine now and the unfolding humanitarian crisis there. The Irish government is meeting regularly to consider further the serious security and political situation that the war in Ukraine has resulted in, including the humanitarian response to people fleeing Ukraine and seeking humanitarian protection in Ireland. And that will be our priority in the period ahead. Of course, the position of both Ukraine and Russia in global agri-food supply chains has consequences globally. And we must act here on the island of Ireland, as well as with our international partners to secure food security. This emphasizes some of the themes being discussed here, including resilience. The UN Food Systems Summit last year and its follow-up period will advance the significant potential of food systems to contribute towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. We are committed to working multilaterally to advance and to advocate for food systems transformation. And I'm sure you will hear more in this regard from Tom, who, as well as leading the Food Vision process, was also appointed as our Food Systems Summit Special Envoy. Both Food Eye and Food Vision 2030 recognize the benefits and need for a collaborative food systems approach encompassing economic, environmental, and social sustainability. The Food Eye initiative aims to consolidate food systems expertise. This, along with the initiative's key aims and objectives, will greatly benefit the island of Ireland, as well as helping to inform the transformation of global food systems. I welcome the official launch of Food Eye, the All-Island Food Integrity Initiative, and I want to thank you once again for the opportunity to speak to you today. Many thanks and best wishes.
Thank you very much to Minister McConalogue. And as Minister McConalogue said, Tom Arnold is our keynote speaker today. We thank Tom very much for doing this for us. Tom, as many of you know, is a real advocate for sustainable food systems. His primary degree was from UCD in agricultural economics, and he has master's degrees from the Catholic University of Dublin and from Trinity College Dublin. As many of you know, he served as the chair of the Irish 2030 Agri-Food Strategy Committee. He's on the EU Commission's Task Force for Rural Africa and many other initiatives. Most recently, he served as the chair of the EU Commission's high-level expert group to assess the need for an international platform for food systems science. He is the Irish government's special envoy for food system and a member of the Champions Network for the UN Food Systems Summit. He's a member of the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition and a member of the Board of Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition and many other accolades. So we're very, very grateful that Tom has taken the time to come and to be the keynote speaker here at the launch today. So I'll hand over to you, Tom.
Fiona, thank you very much indeed, and it's indeed a pleasure to have the possibility to give this keynote address. My presentation is going to appear on screen presently, I hope.
Sorry.
Will I press it? Sorry. Okay. These are the key core messages that I want to communicate today. Firstly, that there is increased political momentum in support of sustainable food systems at national and international level, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict will add to this momentum. As the Minister said, we have Food Vision 2030, and it makes a commitment that Ireland wants to be a leader in sustainable food systems. And we have the coincidence, happy coincidence, that Northern Ireland has got broadly similar approaches in its policy on sustainability. Sustainability at the heart of Northern Ireland's agri-food policy. So, and then, but there is a really important point that translating this vision of a food system that is economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable into practical reality is a significant challenge, and that the scientists have a key role in meeting this challenge. But this initiative that we're launching today, the All-Ireland Food Integrity Initiative, is a really excellent example of what scientists can do. This is the structure of my presentation. I want to talk about sustainable food systems in their historical context and over a long period of time, while acknowledging that this notion of sustainable food systems is really only a concept that has emerged within the last decade. I want to talk about Food Vision 2030, its innovation and its international relevance. Where does it fit within the emerging debate at European and international level? And then at the heart of what this event is about is what are the opportunities for all-island cooperation on food system sustainability. Taking the long view, and this is an important slide, it talks about it's an OECD slide showing the long-term evolution of real agricultural prices. And we see that over the 1960 to 2020 period, essentially you had a sustained fall in real agricultural prices at international level. You had some peaks along the way. In the early 70s, for example, there was a big spike in food prices. But after that, food prices were falling consistently for about over 30 years. And then you had a peak in 2007, 2008, and later on 2011, and we now have another one due to the Ukraine crisis. So what does this, how can this graph be explained? And I think you have to go back here to the late 60s, early 70s, when there was a genuine fear that the world was facing a period of mass starvation. And that in particular, this was reflected in India, which was at that stage dependent on massive imports from the United States. And that was the background to a World Food Conference in 1974, which was a strikingly important event at the time, and commitments were made at that time. There was a famous quotation from Henry Kissinger that the bold objective of the conference should be that within a decade, no child would go to bed hungry. Sadly, never achieved. But what was achieved at that stage was a series of decisions, and firstly building on the Green Revolution, which had brought in new plants with higher yield potential, an increased intensity of production, the Green Revolution and the whole scientific infrastructure that underpinned that. And then you were at that point as well where globalization was taking off with particularly in Asia and China, and you had protectionist farm policies in OECD countries. All of that were contributed to this fall in real food prices over a 30-year period. Until we got to 2007, 2008, when for a variety of reasons, you had massive spikes in food prices again. You had riots in over 30 countries, and suddenly food security was back on the international political agenda. But you also had then, at that time, a realization that food security and the idea that increasing food security was only about increasing production, that was not basically a sensible idea. That there had to be the notion that people had to be able to afford food to really have food security. So what we began to talk about from 2007, 2008 onwards was food and nutrition security. We also began to acknowledge that malnutrition, which up to then was equated with undernutrition, was indeed a more complex idea. And that malnutrition actually consisted of three dimensions of malnutrition: undernutrition, micronutrient deficiency, and overweight and obesity, all of which had big human health costs. There also became a recognition that there was the issue between the relationship between food and climate was a two-way street, that the food sector had to find ways of cutting its emissions, and that climate events had to reduce their impact on food production. So that's really where we got to in the period from 2007, 2008 onwards. And the critical insight is at the end of this slide, which says sustainable food systems have a critical role in addressing this food, health, and climate crisis. So looking to the next slide here, we're talking about this, where sustainable food systems has come from in the last number of years, and its increasing political importance. The definition is there. You can see the minister also described it in his introduction. But a critical moment was in 2019 when the UN Secretary General proposed that a UN Food System Summit should be held in 2021 because of the centrality of sustainable food systems to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the outcome of the UN Food System Summit in September of last year was that over 100 countries have committed themselves to what they call national pathways for their food system transformation. Now, it's a very big difference between committing to something and delivering on it, as you well know. And many of these countries, I think, who committed to this transformation have a big journey to take to set up on that pathway. But the other thing to say is that the Food System Summit shouldn't be looked at in isolation. It really has to be looked at alongside three other important international conferences of last year: the COP on biodiversity, the COP on climate, and the Nutrition for Growth Summit in December. So as we look then to the next 30 years, this is really, we have to refocus on what is the really important things to achieve in terms of global objectives. And this is what I'm suggesting it is, that by 2050, we have to nourish, not just feed, nourish a world population of almost 10 billion, while at the same time meeting the climate target of 1.5 degrees. Now, we also have a reality that there is, the politics of food has changed. When we're starting our work on Food Vision 2030, somebody from New Zealand, speaking of their own experience, came up with a memorable phrase to us. He said, "Society has withdrawn the right to pollute." So that's the context in which significant climate targets and this idea that agriculture no longer has the right to pollute is part of the context in which we're working. But in addition to these two big existential targets, there are two additional factors which are now in play. I think the consequences of COVID, the conclusion of which was we need more local food production, shorter supply chains, but we also need to retain the global trading system. And now the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where each country, each region of the world, I think, is reassessing their own food and nutrition security status. We're hearing more talk about strategic autonomy at European level and indeed at other regions. And the question I pose here, and the answer is this year a turning point moment when sustainable food systems have to get increased political priority? And the answer to that question, as far as I'm concerned, is yes. Looking at situating Food Vision 2030 into its wider context, we were asked to propose policies for the sector to achieve economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Now, it is important to say that this is the fifth strategy Ireland has had since 2000. But on this occasion, I think there is significant innovation in this strategy. As the Minister says, we've used a food systems approach to develop the strategy. We've acknowledged that all of the key players have a role to play in achieving a sustainable food system. And we are also very clear that there has to be a coherence between our domestic policy on sustainable food systems and what we advocate in our foreign policy. And it is again important to stress that Ireland is one of the few countries that has used a food systems approach in developing a national strategy. Ireland's opportunity for leadership, and it has to be about, I think, that we effectively commit and implement what we have committed to doing so. And we have to acknowledge very clearly that there are real challenges in achieving sustainability in its three dimensions. And we're going to have to face up with those in a number of short-term decisions. The work that's been done in the Food Vision group on dairying, chaired by Jerry Boyle, is going to have to come up with a way forward about some of these challenges. The whole question of how our horticultural sector and indeed our wider tillage sector can contribute more to reducing imports and indeed giving opportunities for farmers to earn decent incomes is going to have to be addressed. But in terms of looking forward, what we have to do is build on the Irish commitments that were made at these 4 important international meetings during 2021. People probably, it may not be fully aware of, I think, the significant contribution that Ireland has made to each of these international gatherings. And there will be in September 2023 a review of the Food Systems Summit, in which I think Ireland should be reporting on both its domestic implementation of Food Vision 2030 and indeed what it's doing in its foreign policy. Turning in the final couple of slides now to this issue that we're dealing with today, the all-island food system. We have, as I said, a remarkable coincidence of policy alignment between what is expressed in our Food Vision 2030 and the broad objectives of what is in Northern Ireland policy on sustainability within its agri-food system. It's not that surprising in a way, because we share common problems, common challenges, and we have to find common solutions. But we do have a strong tradition here of working positively together on animal and plant health and research. But now, I think within the framework of this initiative, we have the challenge of identifying a portfolio of short and longer term cooperation ambitions, which could fit within the vision of Ireland being an international leader in sustainable food systems by 2030. When I heard about the Food initiative and saw the challenges and what it was facing, of how it described itself, I thought this is actually so appropriate and so timely for this moment. The key words and phrases leapt out at me: net zero food systems, food safety, reducing negative environmental impacts along the food chain, optimal behaviors of different actors, incentive regulation, resilience, nutritional content of food. These are all we have to find ways now of translating these key phrases into action. And it has to be done, and this is where I suspect the debate has to go today, with both a short and long-term program for this. I think it has to be ambitious and it has to be urgent. And I think questions about the whole institutional framework to bring this along, and the coordination arrangements and the funds, there are all decisions which I suspect more debate is required. So my final slide, and these are my conclusions, that change happens when politics, policies, and science work in the same direction. And I think we now have to get to the point where this has to be applied to sustainable food systems. There is an international momentum along these for sustainable food systems. Indeed, I would say there is an international imperative that we have to work in this direction. We have a commitment, an Irish commitment to leadership, and it's not just that we want to do the right thing, but it's because we will also, in doing the right things, gain benefit for ourselves, both political and reputational benefit and economic gain. And this is the final core point I want to make, that a serious program of cooperation to enhance sustainability in the all-island food system, it should be integral to that vision of Irish leadership in sustainable food systems at international level. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this will stimulate a very productive debate in the next hour or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, for contextualizing the importance of sustainable food systems and outlining how we got here and where we need to go in a relatively short period in the future. Really, really informative. We're now going to move into Professor Chris Elliott from Queen's University Belfast is going to give us an overview of some of the global challenges. For those of you who don't know, Chris was until very recently the co-chair of the All-Ireland Food Integrity Initiative. He was a Northern Ireland co-chair, now taken over by his very able colleague, Professor Aidan Cassidy. So Chris is Professor of Food Safety and the founder of the Institute for Global Food Security at Queen's University Belfast. He's a prolific scientist. He's published over 500 peer-reviewed articles, very much focused on the detection and control of agriculture, food, and environmental related contaminants. Protecting the integrity of the food supply chain from fraud is also a key research topic for Chris. And indeed, he led an independent review of Britain's food systems following the 2013 horse meat scandal. He's a visiting professor at the China Agricultural University in Beijing and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He's the recipient of the Winston Churchill Fellowship, and he's elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry and the Royal Society of Biology. Chris was awarded the Royal Society of Chemistry Redwood Prize and an OB in 2017, and he was elected as a member of the Royal Irish Academy in 2020. So thank you very much, Chris, and hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Sometimes particularly my research group call me Dr. Doom, and that is I tend to talk about some of the terrible things about the global food supply system, and I'm not going to change because you're going to get some Dr. Doom now as well. But by complete coincidence, I happen to be sitting in a hotel room in Bangkok at the moment, because what we're doing here is we're setting up an international centre for global food security. And that's pretty much exactly the same that I did at Queen's 15 years ago. And a lot of those things that have been talked about so far in terms of the importance of food, actually we're talking about exactly the same things here in Thailand at the moment. Now, the global food supply system is unbelievably complicated. It has evolved over many, many years. And this is how we go about trying to feed 8 billion people each day of the week. And as Tom Arnold very, very nicely said, is that that's going to increase to 10 billion people over the next 10 or 20 years. So with it comes even more challenges. But then when we think about that in a contextual point of view, what we have to do on our planet is to produce more food in the next 50 years than we did in the past 500. That's what you call a grand challenge. And then the backdrop to that grand challenge is we have all of the issues about our changing climate. And at our institute in Queen's, we monitor the impacts of climate change in food systems, and we pick up more and more issues, crop failures, more issues about disease, spread of disease, fungal disease in particular. So the challenges of not only trying to keep the amount of food that we're producing at the moment, let alone increasing it, are absolutely huge. And we also have massive challenges about our lack of fresh water. And actually, earlier today, I was talking about how some of the issues about fresh water in terms of recycling water are going to cause many, many more food safety issues going forward. And then we have the issue that we have caused very much ourselves. You know, we can congratulate mankind for polluting our planet to such a point that so many of our rivers, our oceans, and even our fields now are heavily polluted with things like plastics, the microplastics and the nanoplastics. Now, I think we've got all of those different scenarios, the climate, the pollution, the water, but also I think over the past 2 years, we have experienced what shocks to our food systems can do. We have had the COVID pandemic, which had really badly affected many supply chains in the world. And now we've got the situation that was eloquently described by the minister in Ukraine. Now, just in terms of Ukraine, I've looked at it quite carefully. It's a country of 44 million people, but produces enough food to feed 600 million people. And now with a reduction in food supply, where's that going to impact in the world? It's going to have a massive, massive shock somewhere. And I will tell you where it's going to happen in the most deprived countries in the world. And what we will see is many more famines happening, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, due to what's happening in Ukraine. So this is the connectivity of the world food supply system that we have at the moment. And often, when I give my Dr. Doom lectures, people will say, look, I was in Tesco's or I was in Dunn's at the weekend and, the shelves were full and we don't have anything to worry about. But actually, we have plenty to worry about, because in the pandemic, we could see there were gaps starting to appear in shelves. In post-Brexit Britain, in particularly post-Brexit Britain, Northern Ireland, we can see massive gaps in our shelves now. And that's because of the perturbations in terms of supply and demand. So things are changing, and changing quite dramatically, about having enough food for entire populations to live on.
Sorry, Chris, sorry to interrupt you. Could I just ask you, would you mind just going full screen on your display there, please? It's the legibility of some of the slides is a little bit low. Perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
No less, no trouble. Yeah, so I just talked about our full supermarket shelves. That is something that our food industries work incredibly hard to maintain, but are under more and more challenges. And I've talked to many people over the last 2 years, and I think my conclusion is now that we face more issues about integrity of food supply systems than we have since the Second World War. And the thought now about having to ration food, can you imagine that? Can you imagine being given a ration book? Well, we won't be. It'll be on our phone, it'll be digitized. But these are the potential things that are going to happen in the future, because we have become, I think, very, very complacent, really complacent about there's always going to be enough food. We don't need to worry about it, because for generations we've had surpluses of food. That is changing, and changing really quickly. So I think we have to come over this complacency now and really start to think about our food supply system on our island. And I often talk about the resilience of that food supply system, not just to feed the 8 million mouths on the island of Ireland. We produce enough food to feed 40 to 50 million people. And we have an obligation to keep doing that as well. Now, this is a phrase that I came across a couple of years ago, is you've got to think local, but you've also got to think global. And it's called global food. And what I think is we have this opportunity on our island of Ireland now to think locally, nationally, but to think globally as well. Now, I would love to be challenged about this, but I do not know anywhere else in the world that has got a food eye. Nowhere where all of the major research providers in terms of agriculture and food systems have come together. Because you know what? Normally we're competing against each other. We're always after scraps and looking for little pieces of funding. And I think through the good offices of Fiona, myself, and quite a lot of other people, over the past 3 years, we've really developed this food eye where everybody is coming together. And I think the amount of interest that we've got from industry is a very clear sign that the whole concept of food eye is the right one, is the appropriate one. And I now talk about, and Fiona talks about, why not make the island of Ireland the model for the rest of the world in terms of making a resilient, sustainable food supply system. Our small island, but there are so many challenges that we face where the rest of the world faces. There are so many opportunities in terms of the adoption of different forms of science and technology and innovation that we could bring to our all-island food system. And I recall back when I was setting up the Institute for Global Food Security at Queen's University Belfast, somebody told me, Chris, don't be so pretentious. Why would it be why would you call it a global institute? And my answer is Ireland as an island, we sit in the middle of the world's food supply system. We import a lot of our raw materials, we export a lot of our finished goods. If anything happens in one part of the world, it will impact what happens on the island of Ireland. And I think I've been shown that to be correct over the last few years. And then in terms of complacency, I had a conversation just at the weekend about Ireland and, should we be a leader or should we be a follower? And the example that I was given is Ireland was the first country in the world to ban indoor smoking. The first country in the world to achieve something which other people thought was not imaginable. So I think we now start to think about imagining we can absolutely transform our food system on the island of Ireland by working together collectively and in a way that I think nobody else will be able to achieve because of all of those different barriers. So I describe, Food Eye is absolutely the right time. And I think, in Tom Arnold's presentation, he gave some great information. And he talked about the time when all of the actors are coming together. So I'm going to finish off with a paraphrase of Seamus Heaney. And what Seamus Heaney said was, the time to do things is when man and time rhyme. And that's exactly where we are now. We need to change, and we've got all of the actors who come together to facilitate that change. So with that, I'll stop talking now and I'll go back to our chair, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Chris. I have to say, Chris, there was a little bit of optimism there. It wasn't all Dr. Gloom, which is
Did my best.
No, thank you very much, Chris, for outlining the challenges. So I'm now going to introduce you to the concept of the All Island Food Integrity Initiative. So just bear with me while I share my screen. So is that full screen for you now?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So
Fiona,
yeah.
Just Anne Finnegan was going to give a response to Chris's presentation.
Oh yes, sorry. I was just sorry, excuse me. Yes, sorry. Can I introduce Anne then, please? So for those of you who don't know, Anne is currently policy analyst with the Irish Farmers Journal, and prior to this, she worked for the AIB Bank. Most recently as the head of food, fisheries and Brexit, and prior to that as head of agriculture. She's a graduate of the UCD School of Agriculture and Food Science, where she completed a Bachelor in Agricultural Science and undertook PhD research into farm health and safety. And we're very grateful to Anne, who's going to give us an industry and a more policy analyst perspective on the challenges. So I'll hand over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And I'm also a proud Donegal woman, so I'm here to buoy up the numbers as well today. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to join you this afternoon to provide an industry's perspective on some of what Chris and Tom have already discussed. I think there's general agreement that it's been at least a number of generations, if indeed ever, since the agri-food system faced the degree of change that it now faces, and the scale of the policy change, uncertainty and income volatility that farmers are now facing is almost unprecedented. The opportunity remains clear. Continued demand growth is projected, aligned to growing incomes, urbanisation, population growth. But for farmers on this island with so many natural advantages, I think they're less sure of their ability to participate in that opportunity than at most other points in the past. There's widespread acceptance in farming and food production that significant change is required in the sector to support the effort in limiting and hopefully reducing global warming and reversing biodiversity loss. However, the sector does struggle to accept that this must come at the loss of productivity. And I think in the past 3 weeks alone, since Russia's invasion and terrorization of the Ukraine, it has really exposed the vulnerability of the food system and the risks associated with reducing production in Ireland and in Europe and more broadly. I suppose if this decade in agri-food will be about the sustainability of production, then the last decade was almost certainly about volatility. And I think the sector has become very accustomed to volatility, the volatility of supply and demand, and efficiency all along the supply chain has supported volatility management. At farm level, it's been about breeding, grazing management, financial management. At processor level, it's been about market diversification, R&D, and financial tools. Yet we're here now in a new era of global political tensions, where the US-China trade wars under the Trump presidency, growth in nationalism globally, Brexit, and now Russia's invasion of the Ukraine are all good examples of the degree to which escalating political tensions and shifting political sands have disrupted the agri-food system. And we don't have the tools to manage this new risk. If trade barriers are raised, market access is withdrawn, or supply is turned off, as is currently the case for fertilizer, energy and grain emanating from the war in Ukraine, the impact on supply, demand, consumer prices, and ultimately food availability can be significant. And in the context of food security, as Tom discussed, geopolitics is a new risk that we now have to address. And I suppose, you know, this has consumed our political leaders in the European Commission in the past weeks and days. And I understand the Commission are due to propose a €500 million crisis reserve fund to tackle the soaring production costs for farmers. They're looking at expansion of production onto ecological areas in 2022 as a crisis response. And it doesn't really reflect well on the farm to fork strategy that, you know, within a year of its launch, we're moving into crisis mode to face what is now confronting the world food system. And I think there's certainly a sense that we need to look again at the resilience of our food production system in Europe and in Ireland in the context of what is happening today geopolitically. We know we need to address the environmental challenges, but we can't leave ourselves exposed to the vagaries of global politics and the consequences that that's bringing to food production and availability. And in doing this, we need to ensure that primary producers can make a realistic income and living from the sector, and that the sector remains attractive to the next generation of farmers. And Tom is entirely right that shortening the supply chain makes complete sense. But the reality is that from a policy perspective and an economic perspective, certainly in the case of tillage and horticulture sectors here in Ireland, it's really been stacked against those sectors. And farmers will only produce what delivers an income for them and for their families over the long term. And I suppose we need to very much keep this lens as we move forward with developing policy. The EU farm to fork strategy poses a significant policy change for European farmers. And it's the first time that European policy has been framed to reduce the productive capacity of farms in member states, particularly those in the livestock sector. Without doubt, there will be environmental dividends within the EU from a 50% reduction in pesticide use, a 20% reduction in fertilizer use, and having 25% of EU land in organic production. But there'll also be a loss of productivity and an offshoring of our food supply outside of the EU to regions that we know have lower production standards and much weaker environmental credentials. And the EU's own environmental impact, or their own impact assessment by the Joint Research Council, indicates that a loss of production in member states will happen, and acknowledges that production will transfer to other regions. And we've seen this before. We've seen it in the energy sector as they've embarked on their green transitioning. We curtailed EU production of fossil fuels. We've offshored these. We're about 60% dependent on energy imports into the EU. And we're seeing the consequences of that playing out in terms of the war in Ukraine and the power, frankly, that Russia has wielded over European natural gas supply over the past year. So we can't afford to make the same mistakes in transitioning the food system that we have seen in the energy sector. We need to address the climate emergency while maintaining food production. And we need to ensure that focusing on sustainability, we balance the environmental, economic and social aspects of sustainability. And to do this, significant investment is going to be required, I think, both in research, extension and at farm level. I mean, the current position whereby farmers are expected to invest in and undertake substantial change while possibly seeing their incomes reduced and actually being asked to fund all of this from their existing CAP payments is unrealistic to so many in the sector. I think Chris's aspiration that Ireland could become a model for the rest of the world is wonderful, and I think it's eminently achievable. But to do this, I think it will only be possible when the risks and rewards for all actors along the food supply chain, but particularly the primary producer who bears so much risk in food production, are recognised and adequately resourced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. That's very nicely put, and it's very nice to see the focus ending there with the primary producer. Thank you very much. I'm now going to overview for you the Food Eye Initiative and what it's about. So just bear with me when I share that slide. Can you see that?
We can.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Anne, for sort of rounding off the challenges there, and also alluding to some of the opportunities and some cautionary tales, which are very, very poignant. So over the last couple of years, we've worked together on the island, north and south, to develop the All-Island Food Integrity Initiative. My background is I'm a crop scientist, working a lot on wheat, barley and oats. And as I was telling Tom a couple of weeks ago, I was quite appalled, quite a few years back now actually, when talking to a breeder of crops at one stage, when they said to me, nutrition is not important. We don't breed for nutrition. And it came through to me that the whole food system had gone really, really wrong. That doesn't mean to say it's all bad, but there's an awful lot of good we could do to really fix and make it much more sustainable, and sustainable in terms of environmental, economic, and social sustainability. So we've talked as a group, and I'll introduce the group as I go along, about the development of this All-Island Initiative. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There is amazing activities ongoing on the island of Ireland through Department of Agriculture and DERA-funded research, through SFI centres, etc., etc. Lots of really good stuff happening. But we think that we could get an awful lot more bang for our buck by working collectively and collaboratively, identifying the strengths, also the weaknesses, and filling the holes, and really moving a step change towards sustainable food systems, because we really need another green revolution, as Tom alluded to earlier. So where are we now? We all know that on the island, we're the largest Indigenous industry, the agri-food sector, sorry, I should say, is the largest Indigenous industry on the island. It's very important for our culture. It's embedded in our genes, in our DNA, in our makeup, and it will be a major driver of our future economic development. We have a global reputation as a leader in food quality, safety and production. I see that all the time at EU and international level. But the sector is highly complex. It's a range of actors along the food chain. And the food chain has to benefit all actors. Everyone, as Anne said, has to make a living from this for it to be sustainable, as well as it being environmentally sustainable. The sector is vital to the continued growth and sustainability of 2 jurisdictions on the island of Ireland. So as I've told you, I tell everyone all the time, I'm from Donegal and I live my life on the border. And I realise how much complementarity there is in the sector, north and south. There's so much we do. There are so many policies that are very complementary. There are so many activities that cross the border in the agri-food sector. There's so much we can do together. And in terms of research and innovation, which is what we're talking about here today, there are so many complementary activities in our partner institutions, north and south. We're seeing a bit of a shift. To date, agricultural policy was largely informed by a producer-led approach, but consumers are becoming much more vocal now. There's a much more heightened awareness amongst consumers about the relationship between diet and health. We now have the idea of personalized nutrition, personalized diets. This is a huge change that's happened over the last decade, I would say. And so that's one change. We have that as well as the challenges that were eloquently outlined by Chris and by Anne. And everyone is coming to the same place, as Tom said, where we recognize that we need a whole food systems approach driven by global trends and market drivers. I have to say I'm not a great fan of the farm to fork phrase. I like the idea of soil and water to health, right through the food system, from the soil right through to human health, from the water right through to human health. We need a systems-based approach where we look at all aspects of the chain and how we can improve it using the great resources we have on the island. we have an opportunity for a much more integrated, optimised and diversified all-island food system that will ensure sustainability and profitability for all actors along the food chain, working at a global level as an exemplar, but also at a local level within communities of practice. We really are at the cusp of a global revolution in food systems, and the decisions we make now within the next few years will be key determinants of how sustainable our food systems will be going forward. As well as launching the Food Eye initiative today, we're also very pleased to launch the Food Eye mapping exercise. So over the last year and a half, we've conducted the All-Island Agri-Food mapping exercise, which is the first such exercise to map public funding in food research on the island of Ireland. And from this, we've learned a lot in terms of the strengths in our research and innovation on the island. Also the weaknesses, or I wouldn't call them weaknesses, I'd call them opportunities. It tells us that we're a major player, we knew that already, and it points out some areas where we have key strengths in food production and processing, with a wealth of expertise in farming, processing, safety, nutrition, crop, soil, animal production systems, etc. Huge expertise. We punch well above our weighted international level. We have total citation impact 60% above the world averages. So for those of you not familiar with this, a lot of researchers publish their research, and then the impact of that in terms of how many people read it and evaluate it gives an insight into how much impact it has, how many people read the research. So we're 60% above the average in terms of who's looking at what we do. We have over 680 million in public investment over 5 years. A lot of that has gone into larger centres, and it has led to a decline in an individual research project funding, and there's good and bad to that. Nearly 2,000 individual projects were funded between 2015 and 2020, but overall there's a decline in public sector investment since 2015. So we're very happy to launch this event today, but also to publish the Agri-Food mapping exercise, which you will find a link to on our website, which I will come to later, which really gives an insight into what have we funded, what have we not funded, what areas are in decline, what areas are in growth in terms of public funding, public research funding. Where do we need to get to? Well, agriculture and food systems are recognised with all the policies and planning as a key research priority nationally and at EU level. We know that we need a seismic policy shift, and there has been a seismic policy shift in recent years from prioritising the economic viability and growth of the sector towards ensuring its sustainability and resilience, underpinned by an integrated food systems approach. And you see this in all the funding calls at national and at EU level, where the calls are being thematically framed to support research and innovation activities that address challenges and opportunities linked to policy objectives and sustainable sectoral growth targets. The number of research areas where public investment is not pivoting in line with transitioning national and EU strategic priorities are outlined to some extent in our report, which you can find on the website. And you see particular areas: sustainable land use, plant innovation, agri-digitization, and sustainable animal production. Now, that said, there are amazing activities on agri-food systems on the island of Ireland in terms of research. I'm just going to move this out of my way here. Thank you. We're not reinventing the wheel. What we want to do is to collectively gain the benefit of those and the benefit of the integration of those activities and crossover and feedback amongst those activities on the island, north and south. We want farmers and food producers to be part of the solution and to be a key and integral part of Food Eye to address the challenges facing the sector. They're keen to be key enablers and contributors along with the consumers. We know that from discussions we've had with farmer groups. We need a more strategic whole food systems approach to funding research to really make sure that we're innovative, competitive, and that we underpin the resilience of the agri-food sector. It's not all about money, sometimes it is. There's small things we could do with huge impact. Some other things need more significant funding. But what's definite is that by enhancing the All-Island Partnership We'll ensure the continued share advance and the sustained collaborations will develop that transform the food system for the benefit of the whole island. And we saw that recently in various applications we've put together. We've seen the benefit of working together, and in a little while you'll hear about one such project from Professor Lorraine Brennan. The sort of questions we're asking when we're working together is, how can we transition the island to a net zero food system? Is that a realistic target? And if it is, how are we going to do that? What are the nutrition needs, not just of humans, but of soil, plants and animals? Because we want to enhance the nutritional content of the whole food chains and hence of food for human health. And how can we as researchers and innovators support farmers, primary producers and consumers towards sustainable production and consumption? Sustainable there being environmental, at their social level, farmers work essentially in communities of practice, and obviously at an economic level. So the mission of Food A is to consolidate food systems on the island of Ireland. We want to really get better bang for our buck. That's what it boils down to. We want to consolidate the expertise across the whole island. We've looked at that expertise. We've mapped that expertise. We see the potential in more cross-border fertilisation. We're bringing together academics, industry and government stakeholders to realise a step change in the sustainability of our food systems, but also now more than ever in the security and harmony and integrity of the food system, with the idea of safe, nutritious food at the heart of our goal. That's the mission, and the vision really is to adopt a consumer-driven approach, diversifying the Irish food system, developing the technologies to enable that, and to enhance the food production system, to deliver the technologies that demonstrate the provenance and quality of our existing food systems. We want to build an enviable reputation for the island as a quality producer of food, ensuring consumer health and security, economic viability and sustainability of the national food systems. That's our vision. That's where we want to get to in a relatively short period. For those people who know me, they know I don't have any patience. So 5 key objectives to getting there. Where do we want to get to? We want to provide science-based evidence for sustainable, healthy diets. There's lots of fads out there in all aspects of life, including agri-food. There is science out there that will underpin and will provide the evidence to ensure that we have sustainable, healthy diets. We want to develop new technologies to integrate and optimize sustainable and Irish and transparent Irish food systems. All sorts of technologies, digital technologies, biological technologies, technologies to offset where we need to get to, for example, in terms of the EU Green Deal, which is driving sustainability. We want to develop and adopt new approaches to ensure sustainable food production and processing systems, looking all across the processing and production food chain. There's all sorts of potential and opportunities being developed in terms of all sorts of technologies, from track and trace to low processing, etc. Lots that we can tap into. Behavioural change is key. Tom alluded to it earlier in his keynote. We want to drive behavioural change across the food system. There's no point a bunch of academics working in isolation. We want to work with industry, with consumers, with policymakers to see what do we need to do to drive behavioural change, to ensure the uptake of healthy diets that drive a sustainable Irish agri-food system, and also that drive sustainable agri-food products that are healthy and nutritional for our export market, and to position us as an exemplar at the international level. Ultimately, of course, sustainability is not a compromise in terms of economic viability. We want to increase the competitiveness of the island's food economy by meeting global consumer needs through diversifying agricultural systems, by valorising and valuing the good systems we already have, but with clever diversification of our systems, we can increase the sustainability of those systems and open up new markets. So that's our 5 key objectives. We have worked over the last couple of years as a group of what we would call founding members, all of which have played an equal part in the development of this initiative. So In Northern Ireland, we have Ulster University and Queen's University Belfast, and the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute. In the Republic of Ireland, we have Teagasc, University College Cork, National University of Ireland Galway, and UCD. We have worked over the last 2 years collectively to develop the framework for Food Day. It's not an exclusive club. We're the founding members. We're open to interest from all different members from across the island. So it's not exclusive, it's open, and we welcome all activities. Over the last 2 years, we've developed 5 platforms, which really brings us to focus on the key areas that we want to work. Again, they're very broad. There's lots of activities in this area in the island, which we would not reinvent. We would just recognize and work with those, but some areas where there are gaps. The 5 areas, or what we call platforms, are One Planet, which is really looking at the sustainability of the all-island food system. Nutrition-led health, from soils through to a healthy society. So healthy food from soil through to human health. Food safety, including One Health, antimicrobial resistance, animal health and welfare. Those are 3 key platforms, and there are 2 cross-cutting platforms that impact all of those 3 and more. As I mentioned earlier, behavioural change is a very important component of Food Day, engaging with society and industry and with government to drive a shift in the agri-food system, and total transparency, from data capture to guiding decisions. We now have amazing digital tools that we can bring to bear on the agri-food system to improve the provenance, to demonstrate the provenance and the quality of our food systems. So, in terms of the 5 objectives, this is where we're going in terms of realizing the objectives going forward. Our 7 institutions bring a lot of expertise to bear to deliver on these objectives. And I'm just going to give you some examples now. For example, in One Planet, we have an extensive research repertoire on biodiversity and soil, sustainable soil management, on the management of land, on ecosystems, marine and land-based systems, on reducing our reliance on external energy, for example, through anaerobic digestion, on providing climate solutions, for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, biological inputs, etc. Looking at our animal production and livestock systems and the sustainability of those systems and how to improve that. In terms of plant-based systems, we have extensive expertise across our institutions in crops and agronomy, which of course are to the fore more and more with plant-based diets, and also with looking at the sustainability of our animal systems as we move forward. Horticulture, of course, an area that needs quite significant attention, in my opinion, on the island of Ireland, due to the reduced production of horticulture and our need for much more sustainable horticultural systems on the island. We have grasslands, forestry, aquaculture and fishery, food processing and smart agriculture. So this is just a taster of the activities that we do as a collective and that we will bring to bear on the development of our One Planet platform. Similarly, for nutrition-led health, we go from sustainable and healthy diets right through to the human microbiome. We're interested in health right along the food chain. And as I said, I like the idea of soils through to human health. So soil health, plant health, root health, human health, animal health, health at all aspects, prevention of disease and disease management. There are amazing things we can do now. For example, we work collectively, members of our consortia, on a project which is looking at improving the management of chronic diseases such as diabetes through management of the plants that we grow and the varieties that we grow. Nutritional security is extremely important now more than ever with conflict. And dietary transitions, we have a very strong team on human nutrition. You'll hear a little bit more about that later on, and novel foods. Food formulation, ingredient technology, and microbiome research. There's a huge diversity of expertise within the nutrition-led health platform, and all of these institutions for which you see a logo contribute to that. Food safety is a very important platform within our initiative in terms of One Health, plant health, human health, animal health, reducing residues in our food systems, which is always to the fore. Assuring the authenticity of our food systems is extremely important. There's lots more we could do to demonstrate the provenance, quality, and authenticity of our food systems, to prevent fraud, to facilitate food regulation, and to ensure that we don't have antimicrobial resistance build up, and to ensure we have the surveillance within that domain. And again, the institutions you see on the screen here, the logos, they all contribute to the food safety platform. Behavioural sciences is an extremely important component of the initiative. As I said earlier, there are two cross-cutting themes. One is behavioural change. It's extremely important. And it really is at the heart of the Food Eye initiative, looking at consumer behaviours and choices, consumer trust, citizen engagement, supply chain management, economics, regulation, public policy, the bioeconomy, marketing, all aspects that affect behavioural change. So Food Eye is a collective, not just of scientists, but of all research disciplines across the universities and research organisations coming together, from rural development, social sciences, human sciences, etc., coming together to work in these large, what are called multidisciplinary teams, to deliver better for our agri-food systems. We have very good food systems. We mustn't forget that. You know, one of the goals of Food Eye is also to demonstrate the authenticity, provenance, and quality of some of our food systems. And for that, we believe that total transparency and research in that domain within the institutions labelled here, and others that are growing that aspect of their research, can really demonstrate better demonstrate the quality of our produce nationally and internationally, and really gain consumer trust through that. So we're looking at security, authenticity, traceability, standards, looking at the integrity of the chain. So there are lots of digital systems now, decision support systems, track and trace systems, modeling systems that we can use to ensure the transparency of our food systems, while at the same time increasing the sustainability of the systems, smart agriculture. So that's an overview of our 5 platforms. I've told you what those are, what the objectives of the Food Eye is. We want you to register your interest if you're interested in keeping up to date with this. Immediately early on, one of our first key objectives is to develop a seminar series, a collaborative seminar series, as well as developing specific research projects and collaborative research initiatives within Food Eye. But you can register your research, join us on the website. And just to follow us, you have the Twitter handle. I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I don't really, techie, not the strongest aspect, but we have the Twitter handle, we have LinkedIn, and we have the website, foodintegrityisland.com. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. As I say, if you have any questions, please post them. And also then we will come later on to a Q&A section where we will deal with those questions. But it really is an amazing opportunity, Food Eye. And I strongly believe it. That's why we've stuck with it over the last 2 years through COVID in developing this, because it really has such potential for Ireland and globally to develop these systems-based models. And in that vein, one of the first projects, I think, to come out of this cross-border collaboration and funded by the Irish Department of Agriculture is led by Professor Lorraine Brennan at UCD. So Lorraine is now going to tell us a little bit about her project. And just to give you a little bit of info on Lorraine, Lorraine's an expert and a world leader in nutrition and metabolomics research. She's based in UCD. She runs a nutritional metabolomics group here, investigating metabolism and altered metabolic pathways in health and disease. She's a full professor in the UCD School of Agriculture and Food Science and a principal investigator in the UCD Institute of Food and Health and the Conway Institute. She was awarded one of the most prestigious EU grants that you can get, which is called an ERC research grant in the field for discovery work. Her group were the first group to report the link between metabolomic profiles, so that's looking at what molecules are in your body, and food intake, and paved the way for the development of metabolic-based biomarkers markers of food intake. So you can look at certain molecules are produced in your body as markers of how you are, what food you've taken in and how you're metabolizing them. She's also developed strategies for delivering personalized nutrition and would be a world leader in that domain. She's served as the director of the European Nutrigenomics Organization for 5 years, and she's led a number of important initiatives, such as the development of an early career network and expansion of membership of the organization. She was recently appointed to the National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine Standing Committee on Evidence Synthesis and Communications in Diet and Chronic Disease Relationships. She is, as we're going to hear, the lead investigator of Protein I, which is a 5-year Department of Agriculture funded project on food systems. So, Lorraine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I'm just going to share my screen, and if you could tell me that it's working okay, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Super. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Fiona, and thanks very much for the invitation today to tell you a little bit about a very exciting project called Protein I, which is a shared island sustainable healthy nutrition. We just started this project, so today I'm really just going to tell you what our vision is for the next 5 years, and we don't have any results to share with you yet. So in the context of what we're hearing about today, there's really two things that I want to point out. And the first is that it is a shared island initiative. And that means that we can leverage leading expertise from the leading institutions, both North and South. And by doing that, we were able to employ a food systems approach to the problem. And the problem was diversifying our protein intake on the island of Ireland. So this food systems approach, really what we're doing is we're taking a soil to health approach. We're bringing together multiple disciplines and we're breaking down those traditional silos. And it's really a very exciting time for us. And we're all very excited about the project because it's the first time that many of us have worked together, and it is truly disciplinary. It's funded by a very nice partnership between the Department of Agriculture's both North and South. So the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine support the investigators in Ireland, and Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs support the investigators from Northern Ireland. So as I said, it is bringing together leading institutions both north and south of the border. And I'm going to take you through what the contributions of some of these institutions are in the Protein I project. So we're going to start here with Teagasc. So Teagasc are leading the rural development aspects of the project, and they're co-leading the sustainable plant production aspects of the project. NUI are contributing to the economic modelling in the context of rural development, whereas Ulster University are going to lead development of a digital technology tool that's tailored for the agri-food sector. Queen's University Belfast are going to lead the modelling at a population level of the Irish diet, both south and north of the border, and they're also going to lead consumer studies. University College Cork are contributing to the development of policy recommendations in terms of societal impact for the rural economy. And here at UCD, we're leading the overall project, so we're coordinating it, and we're also leading the human nutrition aspects of the project and the sustainable development for crop production. Oops, it's not mine. Seems to be stuck on me, sorry. So there are many different aspects of Protein I, and I can't go through them all today, but what I tried to do in this diagram was to depict some of the key aspects that I'll talk you through. We hope to develop sustainable plant production systems, but we're going to do that in connection and in close connection with the rural communities, so that we will ensure that anything we develop here will be of value and add value chains to benefit rural communities. We will have a focus on human health, and we'll do this through performing a number of human nutrition intervention studies, where we'll look at how we can diversify protein intake while also maintaining nutritional adequacy in the population. We will work with citizens, and we will do consumer studies to make sure that anything that is developed downstream from novel protein products is actually meeting the need of consumers. And finally, our digital technology solution will work in terms of with the rural communities again and our primary producers to ensure that we have secure supply chains. There are many aspects in food for in Protein I, and I've just highlighted some of the different tasks here, and I'll just highlight some of the key aspects that we're working on. So in task 2, which is the smart, sustainable and diversified plant protein production, through a series of glasshouse and field experiments, we hope to demonstrate the potential of plant protein production under sustainable cultivation. And the products that we'll focus on are wheat, oats, barley, peas and quinoa. In task 3, we'll focus on rural development, and we will look at proposed value chains in terms of economic, environmental and societal impact on the rural economy, and in particular on primary producers and dwellers in the rural economy. We hope to develop policy recommendations that will support development of these new value chains for the rural economy. Task 4 then focuses on human nutrition, and we will do a series of different intervention studies that will help us guide consumers to diversify their protein intake while also meeting nutritional adequacy. And we will focus on the foods and the food products that will be focused on in task 2. So you're talking about food products derived from plant production such of wheat, oats, barley, peas and quinoa. Task 5 then will focus on the consumer first off, and it will do consumer studies looking to make sure that anything that we do develop meets the need of the consumer. We'll assess the willingness of the consumer to pay for value-added products and the willingness of the consumer to shift to more diversified protein intake. Task 5 will also model the impact of diversifying protein intake at the level of the population, both north and south of the border. And then task 6 will look at the potential health benefits of certain plant protein products on nutritionally vulnerable groups. And here we'll be looking to develop value-added products in terms of promoting health during healthy aging. And then task 7 will develop the digital technology solution that will be tailored for the agri-food sector. It will be developed and tested within the rural economy. So it will have very tight links back to task 3 to make sure that what we're developing here will actually be tested in the context of the primary producers. So we have an ambition for Protein I, and I just want to quickly summarize what that ambition is for over the next 5 years. We do see that the outputs of Protein I will contribute to an improved human nutrition on the island of Ireland and subsequently improved human health. We propose that the outputs of Protein I will help enhance consumer acceptance of diverse protein products. And we propose that we can have a template for diversifying plant production on the island of Ireland. And the way we'll do this is to link very closely with the rural communities to ensure that we develop and contribute to a resilient rural economy. And all the while then our digital solution on the outside will support the development of secure supply chains. As I said at the beginning, this is a shared island initiative. It's bringing together many institutions across Ireland, and I have a great pleasure to be with you today to represent many PIs, and they're represented here from across the institutions. Being able to harness the expertise across these institutions really has allowed us to apply a food systems approach to the problem of diversifying protein intake. And I really look forward to coming back maybe in 1 or 2 years' time and to telling you about the outcomes of our project. And with that, I'm going to finish and thank you for listening. And again, very big thank you to our funders, both north and south of the border, to enable this to happen.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. That's a really nice example of what we can do collectively on the island when we work together in research and innovation. It's really nice. I'm now going to hand you over to our co-chair. So this is a cross-border initiative. It's an all-island initiative, and the current co-chair in Northern Ireland is Professor Aideen Cassidy. So Aideen will chair the event from here on out. So for those of you who don't know Aideen, She's a professor of nutritional biochemistry and the chair in nutrition and preventative medicine at Queen's University Belfast. She's also the director for interdisciplinary research within the Institute for Global Food Security. And she has extensive experience of interdisciplinary food research from crop through to clinic. She has a very strong research record and is a global leader, exemplified by her successful long-term collaborations with Harvard, where she is actually a visiting professor. 18's research focuses on understanding the impact of plant bioactive molecules from plants that have biological activity, including flavonoids, on the cardiometabolic health. She was elected a Fellow of the American Heart Association in 2017 and was awarded a Royal Society Wolfson Research Merit Award in 2013. So thank you very much, Aideen, over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, everyone. We now have 10 minutes for questions and I will try and field those. Please, any other burning questions, add to the chat. And if we don't have time during this 10-minute session, we will get back to you over the next few days with answers to address your questions. So a number of the questions that have come in relate to providing the growing world population with healthy diets from sustainable food systems and the evidence base for nutrition research. So I guess I'll start, Fiona, with you and asking, have we maximized the nutritional output of our food system?
No, we haven't. There's an awful lot more we can do in terms of personalized nutrition and personalized health. And I'm sure Lorraine's better able to answer that than I am. But if we look at the systems approach from soil through to human health, looking at the impact of the full chain or the full system, there's an awful lot more we can do to optimize nutrition. So I'd say no.
And Chris, for you, is Food Eye aiming to reduce meat and dairy production on the island?
Thanks, Aideen. And I think the very quick answer to that is no, absolutely not. And what we have to get away from is this whole debate about vegans versus carnivores. It's a very, very poor discussion, very poor debate. We've got to think about sustainability, but also not only planetary health, but human health as well. And all of the attributes that dairy and meat bring to food systems are really important. And I think the Protein Eye initiative that Lorraine talked about was fantastic, because that was about diversification of proteins as well. So that's what we're setting out to do. It's about healthy food, nutritious food, sustainable food, and we are not pro or anti any type of food stuff.
Thank you, Chris. Tom, there's a question for you. Why have more countries not adopted the food systems approach? And also, what is different between the systems approach and what are the conventional approaches that we currently use?
Thanks, Aideen. That's a very good question, because in Fiona's presentation, she started by talking about the traditional approach to developing strategies, and they were characterized by, I would say, very much a focus on a productivist approach and very much a farmer approach. Now, what's different about a food systems approach is that from the outset, there is an acknowledgement of the connection between food, health, and climate. And then you have to ask the question, well, you can't, if you want to change things, you can't change everything. You have to find sensible areas in these areas, food, health, and climate, where you can either find synergies, or you can identify trade-offs where tough decisions have to be made. So when we were developing food systems, Food Vision 2030, that is the approach we took. We talked about the links between food and the environment. That's very much a current topical political issue. And Mission 1 is identifying a very extensive range of connections there and addressing particular problems which can be of benefit both to the food system and the environmental system. A real innovation in Food Vision 2030 was the acknowledgement of the link between food and health, food, diet, and health. That wasn't acknowledged in any previous strategy. You might think that's a very strange thing, but that is the reality. And what we have talked about there is developing very much a collaborative agenda between, say, the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture to really promote better nutrition and leading to better diet, leading to better health outcomes. So I think that issue of thinking about this problem in systems terms is a big change. And it's a change that has now been increasingly accepted at international level. And I would say that Ireland, because of its own strategy process, is more advanced than anywhere else, or at least it's a leader in this field. And I think, building on that leadership to really go after developing food systems, a sustainable food systems approach does represent a real opportunity for the island of Ireland as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Chris, another one for you. How can we achieve a sustainable food system where there's a clear dichotomy between what consumers are willing to pay and the ambition of a sustainable food system?
I think often we get confused about willingness to pay and the cheap food system, because I think we all realize that a lot of the food that we consume is very heavily subsidized. And I think it is really a major role for government to think about some of the levers in terms of that. You've got the opportunities for taxation, you've got the opportunities for subsidizing as well. And I think there's a huge amount of governmental responsibility into how to actually pull those levers, okay? Because suddenly if the healthy food that we talk about is 50% more expensive than unhealthy food, we are just pushing people in the wrong direction.
Excellent, thank you. And Fiona, a question for you. There are debates and decisions about food systems generally focus on agriculture and livestock. But what about the blue economy? Does it feature in the Food Eye initiative?
Very much so, and some of the institutions involved within Food Eye have very strong research activities within that, but it actually is, to be very honest, an area that needs more development, but it's very much a part of Food Eye.
But I just add to that, that I spoke about the 4 important international conferences that happened last year. There's another conference coming up this year, and it's about the oceans. And we really have to look at see how the oceans can contribute to the global nutrition agenda.
Absolutely, thank you. So another question in the chat, probably for you, Chris, is how will the initiative consider the regulatory challenges and food safety risks that may or will arise from the transition to sustainable food systems?
Okay, and many thanks for giving me that nice one, Edwin, because we sit in a very difficult position at the moment in terms of regulations, because we've got the EU regulations and we've got the UK moving away from EU systems, but Northern Ireland sitting somewhere between the two at the moment. So absolutely massive challenges. But I think what we have been able to do on the island of Ireland is look at, say, concepts of food safety. We are one island, we've got one food industry, and therefore we all have to work together, because we need to work together to make sure that we produce safe food here for our citizens to eat, but also we want all of those opportunities to be able to export food to the many places of the world that really want the produce from our island.
Excellent. And in the interest of time, a final question, which is for you, Fiona, is what immediate steps could be taken to increase food security on the island without endangering the environment?
I think just to look at the systems that we work on already in the country, and to look at it as a systems-based approach rather than in small chunks, and applying a systems-based approach, some of the very new technologies that we have that demonstrate the provenance of the food systems, and smart agriculture, ensuring smart inputs. For example, you don't have to fertilize the whole field. You can fertilize a part of it that will contribute to our net zero ambitions. You can fertilize the part that needs it, etc. So there's lots of very targeted things that we could do immediately. And just one example is in the area of smart agriculture.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the speakers so far. So it's my great pleasure to introduce a pre-recorded closing address from Minister Edwin Poots, who's the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in the Northern Ireland Executive. He's held that post since 2020. He's a farmer and he's a huge supporter of the need for sustainable and profitable food systems.
Good afternoon, and may I start by thanking the organisers for the invitation to provide the closing remarks at this launch of the Food Eye initiative. I'm sorry that I can't be with you for the event live, but nonetheless I'm pleased to be involved to mark the launch of the collaboration bringing together the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, Queen's University Belfast, Ulster University, University College Dublin, Teagasc, University College Cork and NUI Galway. Collaboration, the focus of today's event, is a major theme of my department's science strategy framework. Indeed, the vision of our science strategy is that science commissioned and used by the department will be innovative, collaborative and transformative. So moving forward, the science commissioned and used by DAERA will play an even greater role in delivering the intended outcomes of our programme for government and contribute to my department's purpose of sustainability at the heart of a living, working landscape valued by everyone. At today's event, I am aware that you have heard from eminent speakers who have been outlining the challenges and indeed the opportunities ahead as we strive to transform how food is produced and consumed and to enhance our global competitiveness and the reputation of our agri-food sectors. I fully recognise that science and innovation are key enablers of long-term economic productivity and growth and are also vital in terms of underpinning environmental sustainability, as well as high plant and animal health and animal welfare standards. The fact that my department invests around a quarter of its annual budget on scientific activities is a reflection of the importance of science to us and our reliance on what it helps deliver. That said, it is also important that DAERA can optimise the value of this investment. The DAERA Science Transformation Programme has been established to transform how we commission, use, evaluate and disseminate science so DAERA can get the best science, get the best value from science and make the best use of science. In commissioning science, our new research and development strategy directs the department to explore collaborative arrangements wherever appropriate with other government and public funders in areas of shared priorities. So in line with this, my department works closely with funding departments and agencies across the UK and Ireland and internationally, including the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine Dublin, Science Foundation Ireland, US Department of Agriculture and UK Research and Innovation. Likewise, DAERA engages with science providers wherever possible to facilitate collaboration, the core theme of today's event. As highlighted at today's event, multidisciplinary science across multi-organisations is required to address the societal challenges which lie ahead and realise the opportunities which undoubtedly exist for our agri-food sectors. In February 2020, the Northern Ireland Assembly declared a climate emergency, stating that we're facing climate breakdown and a biodiversity crisis. My department has been leading the development of a green growth strategy on behalf of Northern Ireland Executive, collaborating with other departments, local government and key stakeholders from across the business, voluntary and community sectors. The Green Growth Strategy is Northern Ireland's Executive's multi-decade strategy, balancing climate, environment and the economy in Northern Ireland. It sets out the long-term vision and a solid framework for tackling the climate crisis in the right way. The Green Growth approach is about more than just climate targets. It also considers how we deliver sustainable development and safeguard our precious natural environment for our health, well-being and long-term prosperity. Green growth means using the move from a high to low greenhouse gas emission society to improve people's quality of life through green jobs and a clean environment. Conversations about the economy, the environment and the climate crisis must be brought together to show the benefits of tackling it collectively. Decarbonising our economy may be seen by some as carrying risks. However, as discussed at today's event, it will generate many opportunities, and we are particularly well placed to avail of them. This decade, the 2020s, must be a decade of urgent action. Collectively, we must lay the foundations for a more sustainable society before further irreparable damage is done. Through research, development, innovation and investment, we can lay the foundations for a green revolution, the next industrial revolution, which can rejuvenate our economies following the COVID-19 crisis. At today's event, the need for a step change in the sustainability, security, harmony and integrity of food systems has now been the focus, with the view to ensuring healthy, safe, nutritious food. Many challenges lie ahead for our local, national and international agri-food supply chains, with an increasing need to adapt and mitigate the impacts of a changing climate and political instability. I'm confident that the science delivered by Food Eye and others will rise to meet these challenges and create new opportunities for our agri-food sectors, putting sustainability at the heart of a living, working landscape valued by everyone. Again, thank you for the invitation to participate in today's focused Food Eye event, and best wishes for the future.
Thank you, Minister Poots, and thank you for your support for our initiative and for the need for a step change in our approach and the need for urgent action. I think it's left for me now to close this launch event, and I would like to thank all of the speakers who today have really highlighted the complexity of our food systems. The climate change, Brexit, COVID pandemic, and more recently the war in Ukraine have put significant pressures on what is already a very creaking system. And we need to transform food systems urgently. But we can only do this by the approach that we have set out here today, this interdisciplinary approach. And as you've heard today, we have that breadth of skills in food systems across the island of Ireland, which places us in a unique position to address these challenges and develop evidence-based solutions. We've come together in this food initiative to work collectively in sustainable food systems as a model which we believe will be viewed and taken up by the rest of the world. So we have an opportunity to act and to provide leadership, and we look forward to keeping you all up to date on the action we take to deliver this transformation to our food systems. And really, on behalf of everyone here today, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.